Hello y'all on YouTube, this is Rob with Rob's Nerdy Knives. Today I have a very interesting review, impressions of a knife that a subscriber allowed me to borrow from them, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much to that awesome subscriber. I really appreciate it. You know who you are, and I know you don't want me to mention, so I'll just say thank you. And it's thanks to awesome subscribers like that that sometimes allow me to borrow their knives to be able to do some of this content. I'm very grateful, so I just want you to know that. Thank you. Today's impressions review is going to be on an Orser Kickstop. So this is the Jared Orser F22 Kickstop flipper knife. This is titanium with a titanium insert, and it does have titanium scales that are chamfered, and it's bolster lock. As you can see, the lock is inside the scales itself here. M390 blade steel, and this is a kickstop. And so the kickstop, as you see, it has a nice deployment, but the kickstop disappears. And what I mean by that is, if you can see down here, you see how this moves around? It comes in and out. The kickstop is actually on its own pivot with washers in here, and it moves around. So when it's open, it's in the lock position, it's not visible. And then when you release it and it closes, it comes back out here. And so that's what gives you a little extra leverage to open it. So that's called the kickstop. And I believe the kickstop was created by Lee Williams. Yeah, Lee Williams is the designer of the kickstop, and this is the Orser, Jared Orser F22 design. All right, so it's a very sleek knife. It's very contoured. It's got titanium milled deep pocket carry clip, as you can see. So that's some of the materials. It's a flipper. There's no other means of deployment, but it is a bolster lock, which means it's a frame lock, but there's a scale on the outside, so it almost is like a liner lock, right? Now this has a steel bar insert and an over travel stop, but it doesn't really need it because of this bolster here, this titanium scale over the titanium liner here, or lock bar. And you can see there's already a little cut relief in that lock bar in here as well. All right, so, and there is a little relief, you can see that. It's pretty even here if you go like that, but there is some cutout here and here so you can get to it. It's not as easy as I would like for it to be. The action is pretty decent. All right, so this is a user knife, so I don't know, I wouldn't take it apart and oil it or anything like that, but I mean, I think the action is pretty nice. It's relatively centered. It's a little off to the left, but let's open that again. Yeah, it appears as no blade rockets in there nicely. And let's look at the detent when it goes in. Oops, let's do that again. I did that too fast. Here we go. All right, so it does click in nicely. No detent lash. It's in there well. It flips really nicely, and it drops relatively nicely. All right, so that's the materials. I do like this little bar. Some of these come in a brass insert. You know, some of them will have micarta, some of them will have carbon fiber, and they'll have different inserts, different materials. You could have. So there's a bunch of variations of these. There is some jimping right here on the flipper, which gives you some nice control on that as well. It has a nice swedge on here, so you can control your cut. It's a flat grind all the way down, relatively thin. It's not a super thin slicer, but it's not a super thick knife, relatively sharp, long blade, as you can see. We'll get into the measurements here in a second, but I think that's pretty cool. So that's some of the things on there. All right, so we talked about that. So let's get into the measurements real quick. Let's go ahead and measure this knife. Where is my scale? I put it over here somewhere. All right, there we go. All right, let's see what the weight on this one is. So it's 4.11 ounces. So it's, you know, not a light knife. Definitely has some weight to it. And let's look real quick. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of relief weight cutting. There's, like you can see in here, there's not a lot of relief weight relief, if you will, from milling in here. It's a titanium on top of a titanium liner. I believe that's titanium. Let's just double check that real quick. Yeah, that's all titanium. No stick. Yeah, so there we go. So titanium on top of a titanium, all right? So, but there's no relief. You know, that's probably where some of the weight comes from. All right, let's do some measurements real quick on the length of the blade. All right, overall, the length is it's a hair shy of 8 inches, I would say, right? So 7 and 15 sixteenths of inches long. All right, let's look at the overall blade length. The blade length looks like it's around to the base of the knife. We're probably at 3 3/8 of an inch, I would say. Cutting length, we're looking at probably 3 1/4 inches. So it's definitely over the 3-inch thing, something to keep in mind. Handle length, where you put your hand, you got about 4 1/4 inches. If you choke up, you can choke up a little bit. You might get about 4.5 inches. I would be careful. There's no jimping anywhere, really. This is not really jimping for your hand. If you choke up, you could slip, so you don't really have a way to carry that. So that's just something to keep in mind of a concern, you know, especially with a knife like this with no way to catch your hand, you know. I like that for, especially if you're doing hard use and you're cutting. So let's look at the blade stock thickness. So 131 hundredths of an inch, so 0.131 inches. So, you know, it's not super thin, but it's not super thick. Comes to a relatively thin edge down here, so there is that. I think that's kind of cool. All right. All right, so we talked a little bit about that. Let's talk about the knife category. So this knife itself is going to be, it's close to, I want to say, it's just under $400. Most of these run around $380. I mean, some of the micarta ones can be down to the 300s, low 300s, but this definitely is over the 300 range. So this is a high-end knife. It's definitely under the $600 range, so it's not in the custom, semi-custom, mid-tech kind of range. This is definitely going to be, you know, a little expensive, but it's nice qualities. It is made by Riot. There's a lot of nice things to like about this, but there's a few issues I have and some things that really would prevent me from ever buying this knife, and I'll talk about that here in a second. Purpose, EDC, yeah, it's really nice EDC. It's definitely a nice gentleman looking knife to carry in your pocket. It's very sleek, very discreet. I like that. It is relatively large, so it's a kind of a bigger knife. You can see that here. And I mean, the blade with the overall together, I mean, that is relatively large, right? So, you know, you have to deal with that and think about that. But it is pretty discreet, and if this size is not too intimidating for your, you know, the surroundings that you're in, the environment where you're at, then this would work really well. I think it's something definitely worth considering at that point, right? EDC use, you know, I'd say, yeah, you can carry it every day. I mean, to me, it'd be great for opening letters boxes. I think it's definitely that. It is a liner bolster, frame lock bolster lock here, so it does lock up really well. And we got a, you know, a good 20%, 30% lockup, so it's solid, no blade rock. It's in there really well. So I think you could do some hard use. My only worry about hard use is slipping of the hand. I wouldn't want to slip this way and cut my fingers, because that could be really dangerous. And I want to make sure you have a good solid grip. You would have to really leverage your clip a lot, and you'd have to be careful on anything that pulls, or could potentially, if you're cutting and you're going in and it slips your hand in, like if you're cutting here and it sticks and your hand slips in as you're cutting, you got to be careful about that. There's nothing really to grip. So for instance, like I have a Sharp by Design, I've got the flipper right there, so I'm not going to slip past that. It's going to definitely kick me and hold me right there, and I've got some jimping. So if I'm pushing and I get stuck in something, it's at least going to protect me. It's going to be like a guard for my finger. I like that. You don't have that on here, which sometimes is by design. People want that to be discreet and look like this, which is fine if that's what you're looking for. And that's the whole idea of the Kickstop. It's very discreet and it hides like that. So that could be really appealing, right? Is it a collection piece? Maybe for some this is a collection piece. Maybe you like Jared Orser Designs, the F22, beautiful piece for sure. It's a unique design. I like that. I would be more cautious for hard use. Definitely EDC, I think, would be fine. Boxes, letters, and sorts of things like that. All right, so let's talk a little about the ergonomics, the design handle. So it's nicely contoured, as you can see, contoured handles. You see a little kind of curvature. These are relatively rounded. It's not as round as maybe I would like, and maybe that's intentional so it doesn't roll as much in your hand. I get that. So there's that. The clip is kind of got some sharp edges. I don't care for that. Those are hot spots, especially if I'm gripping in a certain way. I can feel that, and that would definitely dig in. So that's kind of unfortunate. If this was a different finish, I might buff that out to make it a little more rounded. That's just my personal opinion. As far as the Kickstop works really well. Closing works really well. I wish there was a little more relief in here to get to this bolster frame lock. You know, it's kind of hard to get to. This is definitely not fidgety. It's going to be hard to reach in there, especially if you've got big meaty fingers like I do. If you've got thin little fingers, you know, maybe this is perfectly fine. I just wish there was a little more relief here. And I know it'd take away from maybe the overall design, but then maybe, you know, curve this in a little bit more. I don't know. That's just my desire, wish. I wish that was the case, but who knows, you know, maybe this is meant for a very targeted audience. So there you go. Opening closing is nice. The closing works well. It does seem to have a nice drop shut. It seems pretty well. It's on cage ceramic ball bearings, so that works really nicely. It's Riot design. I do enjoy that. I will say it's a little thicker for such a small, thin blade. I wish it was a little thinner grind, maybe hollow grind. It's definitely going to be not a super thin slicer. It's pretty robust, and that makes sense for a long blade. You probably want that strength. I just wish this was a little thinner, went a little higher. I don't know. You know, For me, I would like this to be a little thinner. That's just me. I would love to have a little more finger guard, a little cutout or something. I think that would be nice, just somewhere where a hand could rest. I wish there was some jimping. I do wish that. Now, one thing about the bolster lock, and this was something that I noticed in my unboxing, and I cannot get past it. This is too sharp. This is too sharp, and this is going to cut my hand. And as I was using, I did scratch myself a few times on this. And especially if you're cutting, you're moving anything, if you're cutting cardboard and your hand slips, this is going to cut you. This edge right there is too sharp, too sharp. If this was my own knife, I would definitely chamfer and sand and grind that down. That is unfortunate. This is too sharp over here in the edges. That's really a hot spot. And then as you can see here, I don't know if you can see that, but if we can get that in, I don't know if I can get a good light with the angle here. Let's see if we can I get that on the camera? Oh, where's a good angle? All right, there we go. So I don't know if you can see the clip right here. So the clip is not resting directly on there. It's got just a very little point right there. And so that little itty bitty point on that is holding on there. That's kind of unfortunate. And you know, it's a pretty strong clip. I'm not too excited about that. There's no lanyard hole, which I'm fine with. I don't care about that. Relatively deep carry, but it's not super all the way discreet carry. That right there is kind of a big deal for me. And the clip not resting, sharp edges here, and not really having a place with any jimping to kind of make sure I secure my hand. So this makes it a very, you know, if I like this style and I wanted to use it, I would be very cautious in what I cut and how I use the knife. You gotta be cognizant of that. So there's that. Those are my overall thoughts. Fidgety goodness, you have a flipper, it's a Kickstop. Kickstop's awesome, I like that. It's not quite as fun as the Rendition by Chavez, the 229. That one was phenomenal. Of course, it's a much bigger blade, and that Kickstop is much higher, gives more leverage, it has much more powerful. Now this Kickstop is above the pivot point, so it does give you a nice flip. It certainly is still really robust and nice for this. But fidget factor, as far as I'm concerned for this one, I'm going to say it's a 4 out of 10. 4 out of 10 is the maximum fidget factor. There's no other way to deploy it. You can't middle finger flick it, just one. All right, it does it well, but it's a 4. It's not quite as fun as some of the other Kickstops, I have to admit. So it's okay, right? As far as fidgety goodness, yeah, it's nice. I'm going to give it probably a B+, an 85, and I take it mostly away from the ability to access the lock bar. The lock bar for me, after a while, that's a huge fidget factor, kind of a bummer, because I've got meaty fingers, man. No question about it. I don't have little thin, dainty fingers to get in there, and so that after a while is uncomfortable, and that starts to dig in after a while, right? And that gets my hand sore and maybe pulls the skin apart. So I don't like that, and so you give it an 85. It's still really nice. If this aesthetic really appeals to you, I think you're going to enjoy this. If you like the look of this, I mean, it could just be a really sexy knife for you and you would love it. And that's great. Get the knife you want. But if you're going to ask my opinion, if you're watching this, you're wanting to see what are my thoughts on there. And you may disagree with me, which is absolutely okay. You can disagree with me about every aspect that I'm talking here. That's okay. That's the whole point of this, right? Maybe you find out that everything I say, you are the exact opposite. So then when you watch my review, if I like something, you know you're not going to like it. And if I don't like something, or if I don't like it, you know you're going to like it. So hey, do that. That's okay, right? That's perfectly fine. But I will tell you, I'm not going to recommend this knife. It's a cool knife. It's a nice piece. It's done well. There's just a few major areas that I have too much problems with, and I can't get past that. And because of that, it's just not going to be recommended. I think it is a nice knife. I think it's done well. I like the Kickstop. I like the overall action. I think there's a lot of positives, but it's not a knife that I would buy or I would recommend. All right. I think if you really, really love the aesthetics of this, I would say get it, right? I don't think it's a bad decision to buy. I don't think, but if you're okay with all the things that I pointed out and that doesn't mean a thing to you, by all means, get it and enjoy the knife. Really, please do. But it was definitely a neat experience to have. And I was on the fence, maybe considering buying this. And I really appreciate the subscriber allowing me a chance to look at this, because I would have probably sold this knife because I'm not a huge fan of it. So, but it's a cool experience. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you again. Hey, what are your thoughts? Do you agree to disagree? Do you have any questions about my review or about the knife? Do you have any future ideas for future reviews or videos? Please let me know in the comments down below. I do try to reply to them all. And hey, if you like this review, let me know as well. I would really appreciate that. I would like to know ideas for future reviews, new reviews, and maybe Rob's ramblings. Please, by all means. I like to have those discussions. That's what this whole knife channel is all about for me, and that's the part that I really enjoy. All right, so if you liked all of this, you found this fun, interesting, worthwhile, would you please consider hitting the like button down below? And if you've already hit the like button, would you consider hitting the subscribe button? Subscribing and liking my videos really helps out the channel, allows me to produce more content, do more things, and allows the channel to grow. And if you've done all that, maybe consider hitting the notification button down below so you can be notified of future content when it's dropped. And if you've done all that, hey, maybe check me out over on Instagram at robs_nerdy_knives. Again, that's on Instagram at robs_nerdy_knives. Hey, thanks so much for watching today. Have a great day and a great week. Bye.